Coming off from the 2015 reboot, the plates were definitely hot at Ghost Games. While the reception for 2015 was generally lukewarm, with praise going to the visuals and customization, there were still major drawbacks to be noted, like the always online, not being able to pause the game, and the police AI. Personally, 2015 is one of those entries that I have huge amounts of respect for what the game delivered in the game design department, even close to considering it the most hardcore entry in the newest era of games, where many of its undercooked systems lead to a really specific and unique set of experiences that you wouldn't see today. So, coming into Payback, I had generally low expectations, and to be clear, this speaks true to most games I look forward to. I genuinely find it really hard to elevate my expectations to a position where any slightly under-delivered element completely affects my enjoyment, and in most cases, just being given a solid playground to toy around in is enough for me to have fun. I never needed this game to do something I desperately wanted. I just wanted to be surprised in any way, shape or form, and after putting a good amount of time, I think it is safe to say that the game elevates the formula already established by 2015 and molds it in a way that makes it more gamey than 2015 in a good sense, especially with the multiple updates that came out subsequently, addressing not only the community feedback but also the ongoing major controversy that occurred around that time. So for the next couple of minutes, let me go off and tell you why I consider Payback to be a sleeper hit in 2023. While the art direction of this entry may not be as bold or as striking as 2015, it is still nonetheless a strong representation of the Americana aesthetic, as the game takes place in Fortune Valley, a fictionalized version of Las Vegas, Nevada. Besides the flashy and extravagant inner boroughs of Vegas, one wouldn't expect this type of setting to work that well with an arcade racer, when you account that Vegas itself is surrounded by masses and masses of desert areas. And while the series has always explored different types of topographies throughout the years, some are hits and other misses. Generally, I like it when the games strike a nice balance between city areas and the outdoors, with games like Underground 2, Carbon and Most Wanted being some of my favorites for that aspect alone. But once they go full outdoors, it starts to lose me, with Hot Pursuit 2010 and Rivals not being that hot for me. So, coming to Payback, the biggest thing that struck me the most is how content-wise, it really nails in its diversity when it pertains to the locations where the races take place. But when you take a step back and put the open world in the full picture, its visual identity is really barren. What I mean by this is that while the location variety is commendable, the in-between moments of driving to a certain location or just exploration in general, there isn't much distinct eye candy in the scenery where you can really register landmarks or just appreciate the environmental design. 2015, for example, taking place at night, played a lot with lighting and colors. Locations like this red bridge, a seemingly normal world structure, is super eye-catching and memorable, or this bluish roundabout as you come out of it and on the horizon you are greeted by this warm and inviting orange tint from the city lights. In that sense, it feels that the game was carefully built to elicit those moments, which is much harder to do with a day and night cycle in place. But even then, visual landmarks can also do the same job depending on how it's applied. I honestly don't know. Maybe the art team wanted to commit to how barren Vegas can feel outside, which I guess I respect the commitment, but in potentially doing so, I feel like there was some missed opportunity here. Also, please, I really don't get the overuse of film grain and vignette. It doesn't make the game cinematic, it just makes the whole image noisy and hard to pay attention to, and I'm not a fan of it. At least an option to disable both would have been nice. Payback is an interesting entry as it marks a sort of pipeline that Ghost Games was following, one that slowly but surely meant to evolve and diversify the formula established in 2015 when it came to the core pillars of customization and progression. Alongside it, there's a much more significant push for a more accessible game in the mechanical and visual sense, like implementing quality of life features, reworking the signposting methodology for more clarity during races, simplifying certain aspects, and many more others that are worthy of a discussion. One of the biggest shifts here is that cars are now separated by categories. If you recall, 2015 allowed you to pick any car for any sort of activity, as the theme for that game was illegal street racing. In Payback, the breadth is immense, from off-roading the large stretches of the countryside to runner within the tight corners of the city as an enforcer/carrier. It carries the type of racing from the previous entry and expands upon them with newer additions and the diverse styles of missions that fit within the overall map. And what's more interesting in this change in structure is the rework customization. Life tuning, for example, is undoubtedly one of the best quality of life features, and being able to life tune your vehicles while in the open world is a big game changer. As a brief synopsis, you're part of a crew, and when a fixer sets you up for stealing a precious ride from a highly influential person, that person, instead of having you arrested, decides to use you as a pawn for a revenge scheme of taking her down and the organization she operates with, known as the House, that has a significant influence in the city, like controlling the police and multiple crews. So throughout the game you'll be racing through multiple race leagues against established crews, 10 to be exact, and from chapters 2 to 4, when defeating a certain amount, you'll unlock the story missions that are very set-piece centric and move the story forward. Like mentioned, this structure is much more simplified than 2015's do a couple of races, complete random tasks outside, and the cutscene loop, which results in a much more straightforward and at points a gamey way to approach story progression in a good way. As you'll progress, the intensity also does, and some of the later missions feature some of the most exciting races the game has to offer, especially in the off-road league, where your fight between the car's handling and the terrain is constant and exciting. One of the newest events introduced, Runner, is the most creative the devs have gotten, and one of my favorites, where instead of races, most of your tasks are these really cool courier-style missions which, with or without the assistance of your minimap, you have a timer and you have to pinpoint the best route to get to a spot ASAP, or escaping the police, which in and of itself debuts Car Combat. Combat as a whole is very simplistic, but not in a bad way. You see, introducing combat in your design structure sneakily invites the tendency of scope creep, where you feel the need to add more when in actuality something simple is much more significant than an overload of unnecessary mechanics and systems. And that's the case for Payback, where you're never overwhelmed by the combat, but the simplicity itself brings a ton of other factors you need to be aware of that add more to the experience than one may think, where the risk versus reward constantly bounce off each other, and it feels much more fulfilling than simply attaching rockets to your car. Sometimes you'll have to consider when to hit back at another car, when it's the best time to take a turn and disorientate them, or remain glued to them so they can get taken down by incoming vehicles. And when you combine that list of possibilities with the different classes of enemies you face, like the interceptors or the rhinos, it's something the game doesn't actively encourage you to do, but the curiosity of wanting to try out different strategies and it working gives the combat a type of edge that it's hard to replicate if you don't have complementing systems around it, therefore unique. Equally to the combat, the reworked police AI brings a very welcome ferocity that was sorely missing in 2015. Even on easier difficulties, they'll have no qualms and actively trying to disrupt your flow, prompting you to hit back with everything you got. No joke, alongside the off-road events, getting chased and fighting back against my opponents were some of the most memorable moments I've had with the game. One thing I've been leaving for last, and one I think deserves the most attention, is the performance tuning and the overall economy. On one side, I really like the simplicity of the speed cards, as sometimes the best way to introduce new players to a complex system is through simple numbers and color changes that can signify the improvements you're making to your ride in a clearer way. But at the same time, this game came out during the time when EA was trying to Ultimate Team, or rather overly monetize their single and multiplayer IPs, with Battlefront 2 being the most egregious of them all, and at one point dubbed a Star Wars themed online casino. Said simplicity of the performance tuning and the need to nickel and dime players brought the roulette system, which kicks in at first when finishing races. Traditionally, you can always go to the tune shop, which even though you can purchase parts individually, they are RNG'd with a timer that refreshes the store periodically. But oh wait, don't worry, you can actually purchase specific parts individually through yet another roulette system in place that allows you to pick specific parts or their quirks at the cost of the RNG system. But wait, there's more! You can also purchase the, and I'm not joking here, catch-up packs, which at an expensive price of 100k, it catches up your ride to the ridiculously increasing requirements of the missions. One of the scariest aspects about game design that I vividly dislike is how easy it is to design systems that actively seek to take money from your wallet. While Payback doesn't charge you for in-game credit in an obvious way, the premium currency available in storefronts allows you to earn a myriad of customization items and credit included through a new mechanic called shipments. And since shipments are loot boxes at their core, you really never know how much money you could earn in total, in turn making the entire package a big, grindy and time-consuming stinker. There's a saving grace to this story, however, not eloquent but a much more welcomed one. Amidst the Battlefront 2 backlash, the team clearly noticed the intensity of the whole ordeal, and when looking to Payback, they took to heart not just the community feedback, but also how really scummy the economy and progression was at, and they reworked the entire balance. For example, reducing the tune-up shop refresh time from 30 to 10 minutes, increased the payout of XP and credit during races, and while unfortunately they didn't have the time to overhaul the performance tuning component, they instead increased the rarity percentage in the RNG, so you could acquire higher quality parts compared to what it used to be. These may sound like little changes, but the best way to notice just how significant they are is by checking the playtime. If you go to howlongtobeat.com, the average completion for this game is around 18.5 hours. For me, however, checking the total time recorded from my gameplay recordings, it took me 13.5 hours to beat it. And most of it is due to how heavily I was abusing the economy to overcome the grind that still exists, by selling older cars as soon as I got a newer one in a specific category, and selling older components when I got newer ones. If you play exclusively like this, by the end of the game you can quite literally boost your credit upwards of 700k plus, allowing you to make overpowered builds as they are available. Here's what I think about the story. I'm not going to spend much time discussing the story because A, I really wasn't paying that much attention to it, and B, I have a disdain for generic revenge stories. It's not that I don't like them, but it's such an oversaturated and easy storytelling theme to base your writing on that you really need to stand out from the crowd. This game is not one of those, unfortunately, and while the individual story missions themselves are pretty entertaining and spectacular, the story itself doesn't grab my attention because it simply plays too safe. Say what you will about the Fast and Furious franchise as a whole, past and present, but their willingness to go from street culture and family to espionage and family in just the most absurd and unfathomable ways possible is impressive. The one unique thing that they all still share is the heart in the writing, whether it be the cultural influences from the early films or the family component of the later ones, which for me is the characters, their relationships, and inner conflicts that I love so much. I wouldn't mind Payback having a weak story if the characters were interesting enough for me to care, but most of the cast is just one note in personality that I genuinely lost interest as soon as the prologue ended. Overall, I think Need for Speed Payback was a step in the right direction, and while some aspects have more negatives than positives, what they did jumping from 2015 in terms of structure and progression is one that I commend. And hey, as of 2023 with all the updates later, it's in a much better position than it ever was, and I got no problems recommending it today. Just don't pay attention to the story, focus on the gameplay, and you're Gucci. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, share with your friends, and activate the bell so you can get notification of my latest video, and thank you for watching.